Assalamu alaikum viewers. This is my first lecture of irrigation engineering. Irrigation engineering is an important course of your final year. It is a water related subject, and nowadays we are seeing or observing that water related projects are on the rise, and they are always on the rise in Pakistan. आजकल बलूचिस्तान में वाटर के प्रोजेक्ट्स चल रहे हैं. विंडर डैम चल रहा है यहाँ पे, गोमल, हाँ जी. तो यहाँ नॉर्दर्न एरियाज में भी डैम्स चल रहे हैं सारे. एनीवेज, आई विल कम बैक टू द सब्जेक्ट मैटर. You people have been experiencing water courses, or you people have been reading water courses since fourth semester. The water courses are in the form of environmental engineering 1, environmental engineering 2. Especially environmental engineering 1 is about water supply to domestic users, and then expelling the wastewater from them. This is that is the point where originally environmental engineering comes into play. वरना तो जहाँ तक पानी को सप्लाई करने का ताल्लुक है, environmental engineering 1, that is totally pipe flow, and you have studied pipe flow in fluid mechanics 2. And fluid mechanics 2, we did two main things. One, we studied pipe flow, and the second thing was that we studied open channel flow. So this irrigation engineering subject is the offshoot of the fluid mechanics 2, in which we studied open channel flow. We did a design numerical on open channel flow. We came across bed slope, we came across side slopes, and we came across trapezoidal shape of a running channel, right? And we came across hydraulic radius, we came across wetted parameter. All these terms we have already studied in fluid mechanics 2 chapter open channel flow. Now, what is this irrigation engineering? Irrigation engineering tells you about how natural resources of water that Allah has bestowed upon us, Allah ने जो हमको अता किया है, how those natural resources are diverted and water is used artificially, water is used through man-made channels and irrigation structures to irrigate food, to irrigate crops, and from crops we get food. तो ये सारा एक system है. Anyways, what will be the course objectives? Course objectives तो number 1 of course वही है कि we have to enable students to learn irrigation engineering. Irrigation engineering उनको सिखानी है. क्या किस तरह सिखानी है? पहले तो उनको पता तो चले कि irrigation canals या इनका बड़ा साइज कौन सा है जिसको मेन कैनाल कहते हैं, और छोटा साइज कौन सा है जिसको वाटर कोर्स कहते हैं. So how do they irrigate lands? I mean, are they monitored, or are they designed on the basis of population to be served, or are they designed on the basis of area of crops? तो area of crops को देखते हुए we design these channels. And crops are necessary because they give us food. जब आपके पास खुराक नहीं होती, then the country import wheat to supplement or to supply you people, and that is the loss of foreign exchange. So we have to enable students to understand what is irrigation engineering, where it is applied, how it is applied, how it is designed, on what basis they are designed, these and how the soil interacts with water, how water rises or falls in the soil, and when the water becomes excessive water, the outcomes of that situation, what are the consequences, that is the consequences is waterlogging. And when water is minimized. What is the consequences? The consequences is drought, khushk sali. So water dams and water reservoirs, all these terms you will come to understand them at the end of this course. And second objective is to design open channels. We know how to in this course we design open channels because open channels are the main backbone of our irrigation practices. ओपन चैनल को मैं बार बार ओपन चैनल का लफ्ज़ यूज़ करता हूँ वो इसलिए कि ओपन चैनल्स आर दोज चैनल्स इन विच द फ्लो इज़ ओपन टू एटमॉस्फेरिक प्रेशर. सो water drives through these open channels under the influence of gravity because there is no pressure flow. Pipe flow में तो आपके पास pressure flow होता है, so sometimes you go against the gravity even based upon the pressure. So what we do in pipe flow is that we generate too much pressure at the start of the pipe structure, a pipe network, and then using that pressure water is driven through the pipe network and water reaches the users. But in this open channel flow the driving force is gravity, so you have to keep your channels tilted. Okay, what is the background? Background is that plant requires water, of course, and it requires air. That's natural. So water is given to plants naturally by rainfall. तो मतलब पानी तो आपको फ्लड, सैलाब और रेनफॉल से भी मिलता है. Water is supplied to plants through rainfall and floods, but that water is very scarce, right? So, and that is very unguaranteed. Sometimes that water is too much, like in monsoons, and but sometimes that water becomes completely out of the scene. ये पानी unavailable हो जाता है because of drought. So what you have to do is that you have to store water during heavy floods and during heavy water flow supplies, and then you have to use that water efficiently and wisely during the water scarcity period. So in fact irrigation engineering gives you how to utilize the natural water flow or river flow and how to divert. जब भी आपके पास कोई दरिया आता है तो आप उसको डाइवर्शन देते हैं, हेडवर्क्स बनाते हैं. So the Swat river water is diverted by construction of this Mandara headworks, and water is diverted towards an artificial irrigation scheme. Artificial का लफ्ज़ बार बार इसलिए मैं इस्तेमाल करता हूँ क्योंकि जो नेचुरल वाटर फ्लो होता है that is based upon nature's driving force, and nature's driving force is drainage channel. यानी आपके पास एक catchment है तो lowest point of the catchment will be that drainage point which we call river. सारे इर्द गिर्द के इलाके और पहाड़ों से पानी कलेक्ट होकर आके एक दरिया में गिरता है. तो दरिया जो है लोवेस्ट पॉइंट होता है of a geographic topography. But in irrigation we don't go for that. Though the flow is gravity flow, but we try to sometimes dodge the natural topography by building certain canals and channels जिससे हम फिर खेतों को पानी पहुंचाते हैं. So what is the definition of irrigation engineering? The definition of irrigation engineering is artificial application of water to the land in accordance with the crop requirements throughout the crop period for full-fledged nourishment of crops. देखिए यहाँ पे दो important terms हैं. एक है one term is crop requirement and the second term is crop period. So crop requirement means that you have to supply water that much which is needed. यानी आपने ज़रूरत से you don't have to supply water more than crop requirement. You don't have to supply water more than water is required. And what is crop period? Crop period is called growth period, and you have to supply water throughout the growth time of a crop. Once it becomes prepared for cutting or harvesting, you have to stop water supply. So that time period is called crop period. So artificially supplying water, keeping in view these two terms, the crop requirement and crop period, it is called irrigation. See here, a water course is shown running between fields, and this water course will be irrigating these vast fields on both of its sides according to a set pattern of टर्न्स. एक दफ़ा एक दिन एक ज़मींदार का टर्न होता है तो दूसरे दिन दूसरे ज़मींदार का टर्न होता है, और एक ख़ास मेयार के मुताबिक और ख़ास क्वांटिटी के मुताबिक होता है. Definitely the whole of the land is covered with the same kind of crops. So now what we will be reading advantages of irrigation engineering. Increase in fruit production. ज़ाहिर बात है जब आप irrigation करते हैं तो food production बढ़ता है. No mixed cropping को avoid करना है, because whenever water is scarce, so what farmers do is that they sow two kinds of crops, and if water happens to be more or fit for crop B, then it facilitates growth of crop B. But if water happens to be less and fit for growing crop A, so crop A is grown. So crop A and B, these are just फर्जी से नाम मैंने दिए हैं उन क्रॉप्स को which farmers usually grow for to avoid loss of time, to avoid loss of crops. So this is done when the farmer is totally dependent upon natural water flow, rainfalls and floods. And as I mentioned that these two sources are unguaranteed. So mixed cropping should be avoided, and it is avoided by using irrigation. General prosperity, ज़ाहिर बात है, when you have good agriculture, so prosperity increases. Hydropower generation, when you have hydraulic structures, when you have water diversions, when you have vast structures controlling water flow, natural water flow, and diverting it towards artificial water system of canals and irrigation and water courses. So sometimes dams are also constructed and they do hydropower generation. Domestic water supply, we have got reservoirs. अच्छा एक बात बहुत जल्दी से मैं क्लेरिफाई कर दूँ. व्हाट आर रेजर्वायर्स तब बनते हैं एक बहुत बड़े चौड़ को रेजर्वायर कहते हैं. वो रेजर्वायर्स आर कॉन्स्टिट्यूटेड और दे आर क्रिएटेड व्हेन वी stop water by using a huge barrier which is called dam. Now if the barrier is small, which is called barrage, so no reservoirs are made. Though they are made, कुछ जोड़ बन जाता है, but they are only reservoirs in name. Reservoirs are such huge hydraulic structures which even drown mountains. यानी उनमें पहाड़ भी छुप जाते हैं जो सही reservoirs होते हैं, and they are spread over kilometers. वो किलोमीटर एरिया उनमें आता है. So that is the case of a reservoir, and reservoir is a very helpful thing, but it is not green. I mean, it is not environment friendly. It causes seepage, it can cause earthquake, it can cause fissures in nearby mountains. But what to say, they are necessary. Why are they necessary? They are necessary. They store surplus water during flood season. Anyways, so these water reservoirs, these water collection structures, they even give us waters for normal use. So domestic water supply is ensured as a subsidiary advantage of irrigation practices. दो कि डोमेस्टिक वाटर सप्लाई जिस तरह मैंने कहा ये इन्वायरमेंटल इंजीनियरिंग का सब्जेक्ट है. कम्युनिकेशन from communication we means road. So wherever we got canals, or wherever canals are spread in districts, so what irrigation department do is that they build roads along these canals, and these roads are called inspection roads. They are meant for irrigation engineers so that they can go and observe and check their canals and operations of canals. But that is few and far between. कब inspection team आती है, बहुत कम ही आती है, या कब जब ज़रूरत होती है. Most of the time these roads are empty and they are used by a normal public. Afforestation advantages of irrigation is that they support tree plantation. These are certain pictures of various points or advantages that have been recently or that have been just explained to you people. In picture number 1 we see mixed cropping, so this mixed cropping should be avoided. In picture number 2 we see a reservoir जो मैंने अभी आपको example दी. So these reservoirs, they contain surplus water and they can supply water for domestic use. In picture number 3 we have got that reservoir, suppose near Islamabad or any city. We got a collection reservoir which collects rainwater or water coming from the nearby mountains, and they are stored over here, and then this water is used for domestic water supply. In fourth picture we are observing a communication road built along a canal. This communication road that is built along a canal is meant for inspection of canals, and they are used normally by the village population or by the district population. Even हम भी use करते हैं by the travelers who go from city to their villages. ये शाखचे की कोई रोड है. डिसएडवांटेजेस क्या है इरिगेशन के? डिसएडवांटेजेस आपके पास हैं कि इसमें whenever we do heavy irrigation, so they take the fertilizers that are given to the crops, they take the fertilizers to the groundwater and then cause groundwater pollution. Salinity क्या है when we do excessive irrigation? So the water table that exists below the ground surface, it is raised, and the water table goes and pollutes the root zone of a crop. Pollutes तो नहीं होता, they keep the root zone of a crop totally submerged in water. Damp climate क्या है? Damp climate में ये है कि if you have got a damp climate, so diseases like malaria and dengue that are caused by mosquito growth or mosquito population is facilitated. तो डैम क्लाइमेट को फैसिलिटेट नहीं करना है, इसको डिस्करेज करना है, जो कि इरिगेशन इंजीनियरिंग में आ जाती हैं. लेकिन दैट इज़ these are the disadvantages that have got lower benefit cost ratio. इसका कॉस्ट कम है, बेनिफिट ज़्यादा है, बट खैर वैसे ही हमने मेंशन कर दिया है. एक्सपेंसिव, दे आर एक्सपेंसिव, लेकिन ये है कि पैसे के बगैर तो नहीं होगा ये सब कुछ. Water logging and salinity. This is the picture in which water logging and salinity is shown. We have got a complete chapter on this topic. यहाँ बस इतना याद रखें कि minerals of the soil are pumped to the surface of the land, and this looks untidy. This hinders plant growth. This salt crust is called salinity, and it should be removed. And the procedure by which this salt has risen and get deposited on the land surface, that mechanism is called water logging. Anyways, now we will study types of irrigation, which is also purpose of this chapter, the purpose of this lecture. So I've got irrigation is divided into two main branches. One is called surface irrigation, other is called subsurface irrigation. Surface irrigation तो ये जो कुछ हमें नज़र आ रहा है, तो होल मेन कैनाल्स और फिर उसके बाद ब्रांच कैनाल्स और फिर जाते जाते आखिर में वाटर कोर्सेज, ऑल दीज आर surface irrigation. means or surface irrigation examples, and they work on gravity principles, so that's why they are also called gravity. Anyways, no, sometimes even surface irrigation have got lift irrigation also, but anyways, let's study them stepwise. Surface irrigation is the irrigation examples in which water flow is open to atmospheric pressure, and so irrigation is divided into surface irrigation, in which the water is visible on the ground, and subsurface irrigation, in which water is not visible on the ground. Surface irrigation is further divided into flow irrigation and lift irrigation. Flow irrigation, जब पानी बुलंदी से पस्ती की तरफ ट्रैवल करता है under the influence of gravity, it is called flow irrigation. Lift irrigation, when water is transported from lower point to upper point using pumps, it is called lift irrigation. Okay, ये इनकी एग्जांपल्स यहाँ पे हैं. दिस इज लिफ्ट इरिगेशन. ये देखें, जब पानी को लोअर रेजरवायर से ऊपर के रेजरवायर तक पंप किया जाता है यूजिंग पंप्स, इट इज कॉल्ड लिफ्ट इरिगेशन. आप इमेजिन करें कि ये आपके पास दरिया है नीचे, एंड यहाँ पे आपके पास गांव है, तो ये गांव के लोग ये दरिया का पानी किस तरह अपने पास ऑब्टेन करेंगे? So that water is obtained using this pump irrigation or lift irrigation. ये देखिए, सेकेंड पिक्चर भी है लिफ्ट इरिगेशन. द लोअर एलिवेशन वाटर इज ट्रांसपोर्टेड टू अपर एलिवेशन वाटर. और ये फ्लो इरिगेशन की एग्जांपल तो ठीक है कि वाटर ट्रेवल्स फ्रॉम हायर एलिवेशन टू लोअर एलिवेशन अंडर द इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ ग्रेविटी, तो ठीक है. अच्छा, सबसर्फेस इरिगेशन की क्या एग्जांपल्स हैं कि आपके पास नेचुरल सबसर्फेस इरिगेशन चल रहा हो. इस तरह एक बहुत बड़ा रेजरवायर है. रेजरवायर की एग्जांपल आप देखें, आप क्या समझते हैं कि इनके नियर बाय एरियाज इरिगेट नहीं होंगे आर्टिफिशियली या सबसर्फेस या इनविजिबली? क्यों नहीं होंगे? बिकॉज दिस वाटर सीप्स एंड देन सप्लीमेंट्स द ग्राउंड फ्लो और द ग्राउंड वाटर, एंड दैट ग्राउंड वाटर ट्रेवल्स टू द नियर बाय जोन्स. अनफॉर्चुनेटली, बदकिस्मती से इस तरह होता नहीं है. होता इसी तरह ही है, लेकिन गलत तरीके से. The groundwaters of the nearby areas are so much supplemented with this reservoir water, and the water level is raised to such an extent that it causes waterlogging in nearby areas. तो reservoirs के जितने भी करीबी इलाके हैं वो सारे ख़राब हो जाते हैं. शुरू में तो ठीक होते हैं, लेकिन ख़राब हो जाते हैं फिर. Anyways, let's move forward to our original page. This is our original page. Subsurface irrigation has got two main types. One is called natural subsurface irrigation and other is called artificial subsurface irrigation. So when water is invisibly transported from one point to another point naturally through groundwater mechanics, groundwater flow, it is called natural subsurface irrigation. And when it is done artificially by man-made design, it is called artificial. So this is ये तो सरफेस इरिगेशन है, ठीक है. तो वो है सब सरफेस इरिगेशन की एग्जांपल्स देखें कि पाइप्स के ज़रिए वाटर को डायरेक्टली रूट जोन्स तक पहुंचाया जाता है ताकि वाटर एवेपोरेट ना हो. दिस आर्टिफिशियल सब सरफेस इरिगेशन प्रैक्टिस इज यूज्ड इन एरियाज वेयर वाटर इज susceptible to evaporation, like very hot areas like Balochistan or Sindh. Even Punjab is very hot sometimes, not always, but this practice is usually adopted in desert zones like Balochistan. Artificial subsurface irrigation. Punjab का पानी बहुत है. Flow irrigation ये है कि it can be divided into perennial irrigation and flood irrigation. What is perennial irrigation? Perennial irrigation is when water supply is constantly ensured. It is called perennial irrigation. Flood irrigation is when water supply is not constantly ensured, बल्कि वो उस वक्त दिया जाता है जब फ्लड्स आते हैं, तो उसको कहते हैं फ्लड इरिगेशन. फिर perennial irrigation की दो किस्में हैं. One is called direct irrigation, the other is called storage irrigation. Direct irrigation, when water is supplied directly to a field ऑन द स्पॉट, यानी पानी आ रहा है अपस्ट्रीम से या दरियाओं से या डाइवर्जन से और आपने पानी पहुंचा दिया खेतों तक, इट इज़ कॉल्ड डायरेक्ट इरिगेशन. लेकिन स्टोरेज इरिगेशन क्या है? वो ये है कि व्हेन वाटर कम्स एंड इट इज़ फर्स्ट स्टोर्ड एंड देन गिवन टू क्रॉप्स अकॉर्डिंग टू देयर नीड्स और अकॉर्डिंग ऑन सम अदर टाइम. So it is called irrigation via storage. Storage से गुजर के irrigation किया जाता है. Anyways, all these things have been discussed. तो ये round the clock irrigation, round the year irrigation है. It is constant and continuous. And flood irrigation, ये जो है it's heavy and non-stop. It's done in the form of a flood. Flood irrigation देखिए ना आप. तो it is what is done actually in flood irrigation. In flood irrigation, water is heavily applied to fields. In flood irrigation, water is applied to fields heavily. Water is heavily applied to fields. And but it is unguaranteed. ये आपके पास पेरेनियल इरिगेशन है. पेरेनियल इरिगेशन के फिर दो आगे हिस्से हैं जिसको कहते हैं डायरेक्ट इरिगेशन एंड स्टोरेज इरिगेशन. Direct irrigation picture is given on the right hand side. Water is directly diverted and applied to a district or a city or lands. And in storage irrigation, water is first stored into a reservoir and then given in some other time period. Subsurface irrigation के दो types हैं, natural, artificial. तो natural subsurface irrigation जो है वो है कि when water seeps from a reservoir and supplements the groundwater or the water table of the nearby areas, and the water table rises and then it gives or it's give food to the roots of the crops grown on the nearby areas. It is called artificial, natural. Unlined canals, जिस तरह ये देखिए unlined channels हैं, यहाँ से भी सीपेज होती है, उससे भी पानी सप्लीमेंट होता है नियर बाय एरियाज़ को. यहाँ देखिए यहाँ पे कंक्रीटिंग हुई है तो ये पानी तो सीप होने से रहा. दिस वाटर इज़ नॉट गोइंग टू गेट सीप्ड एंड सप्लीमेंट द क्रॉप्स ऑफ द नियर बाय एरियाज़ because it is traveling through a paved structure which is called lined canal. और ये artificial subsurface irrigation है in which through a system of pumping artificially water is applied directly to the roots of the crops so that it should be avoided, it should be protected from evaporation and loss. So this is drip irrigation. I think 30 minutes time is over for this lecture and it has been properly explained right from the start till end. Okay, thank you for listening.